Barbershop Talk family, hello. We're live. We're back 2019, 2020. Thank you for tuning in. We got a lot of good stuff this year. We wanted to welcome all of you back. Just to let you know what's new this year, we got some upgrades, and we'll show you that pretty soon, what we've done here at the shop, or what actually Director Andre Crockett has done. We've got some different camera views we're going to be working on this year. And then Barbershop and Social Services, they're doing a lot of great things. Director Crockett will be talking about some of that stuff in the future. And then this year we want to do some advertising or sponsorships, and we've already talked about that. But if you're interested, let us know how you can join with us, partner with us, advertise your organization or business, and personal donations. Start talking about what's going on in our communities. For some reason in our communities, we don't know what's going on. Events happen and people don't know what's going on. So we're going to do our part to make sure people know what's going on in our community. One big thing coming up on October 5th, 2019, the Twin Cities Informational Expungement Fair. We know a lot of our folks have overcome a lot and they're trying to move on with their lives, and one of the things they want to get done is expungement of their record. This is a big thing being ran by Minnesota Attorney Keith Ellison. So he'll be up there if you want to know information about expungement. And then entertainment, our own local Annie Mack. She has all kinds of shows going. She is busy, but she has 3 shows going. One tonight at 4:30. Then she'll be up at the Dakota Jazz Club on October 3rd. And then in November 2nd, she will be at the Chatfield Center for the Arts. So catch up with Annie Mack. She's a busy gal. So again, thank you for tuning in.
At Greenhouse Graphics, we offer award-winning design services at affordable rates to help your business attract customers and ultimately affect your bottom line. Working with you one-on-one at whatever stage you're at in developing your brand. I want to help drive success to your business with excellent design and quality marketing materials. From startup companies in need of custom graphics, websites, logos, to seasonal maintenance, I got you covered. I take time and listen and care about your needs. I understand that image and quality mean everything in business when it comes to leaving a lasting impression on your clients and customers that lasts a lifetime. With nearly 2 decades of experience, it is in my DNA to create eye-popping graphics for your business. Greenhouse Graphics, making sure you always look your best.
About the elephant in the room topics now, and really there are no elephants in the room as it relates to the barbershop. So actually we probably need to change this title. But the topics that we're going to cover here in a couple of minutes with our guests and our co-hosts are Dennis the Menace, great 30 for 30 that came on, I believe, at the beginning of last week. How can we not talk about AB? This is going on in all our shops. And then the idea of race or culture in our schools. We're going to talk about that as well. So tune in to Barbershop Talk. Here we go. Yes. All right, Barbershop Talk family. Welcome back at 2019, 2020. And we're back again. We've got the director, Andre Crockett, co-host Bud Whitehorn. And we can't forget Gil the Barber. Our guest with us today is Superintendent Jeff Elstad with Owatonna Public School, so we'll be talking to him. But let's get into some elephant in the room topics first. And Jeff, you don't have to chime in if you don't want to. I know you have to take a political position on some of this stuff, but you can if you want. Dennis the Menace, earlier this week, I believe it was 30 for 30, they had a show on Dennis Rodman. I don't know if you saw it. Great show. Obviously, Dennis Rodman is a Hall of Famer, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And as 30-30 does on ESPN, they always cover the life stories. But I thought this story was particularly powerful because they went into Dennis Rodman's previous life and how he grew up as a young youth and the trauma that he had. I think he had 2 or 3 older sisters, didn't have a dad in his life, didn't have males in his life, and he grew up very quiet and shy. And then when he got to the Detroit Pistons, where he became this Hall of Fame forward, he was very shy, so on and so forth. And then after that, when Chuck Daly left, he lost his mind, blah, 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 quote unquote, and became the wild Dennis Rodman that we know of. And I thought it was great because our young black men and the trauma that they grew up with, the trauma that we grew up with, how do you put that in context, especially when, and Andre would know a lot about this as he runs the Sports Mentorship Academy, when they get fame or position, and that's when usually that trauma is exposed. How do we deal with that? Should, and this is the controversy, should young men get those issues out before, or, and this sounds crazy, in Dennis Rodman's case, achieve success first, and then let it out. That way he has his millions, he's not going to jail, and he can take care of that. If he would have exploded prior to, he wouldn't have been the Hall of Fame athlete. That's stupid, but what do you think about that?
I think, first, we formed something called Trauma-Informed Sports Program. And so one of the things that we realized that those who face trauma can't play in high-stake competition. So the higher the competition comes, the higher the trauma starts to perform itself. And so that's why you see it in athletes, it become magnified. I think we have to look at now sports as a way to heal the trauma, because sports have a built-in mechanism or structure that it can help with DBT and everything else. So we have to look at sports totally different across the board. We know that I think it's 1 out of 3 and 1 out of 5 is real high aces, adverse childhood experiences, right? Now, I don't think coaches equip. You know, we do a good job of training the teachers. Some of the coaches are teachers, but the coaches who are teachers, they find it sometimes boring. How do I implement that in my coaching style? So one thing we have been able to do is train youth sports coaches and Owatonna Public School coaches of how to basically identify that, right? So the problem is that now you can't get them just to play high stake competition sports first. You got to deal with the trauma first, because and what's so good thing about this is that just like they do yoga and everything else, we can do athletic sports at the same exact way. Right. So what happens is that as they get older, right, especially when it's off the court and they no longer have the sport anymore, the football, basketball, whatever it is, you really see it display, right? And so what happens is that we know that that behavior is language. Right? So they look at these guys and say they're menaces and they're thugs and all this stuff. Instead of they looking at that this is trauma. The trauma is speaking. So find out what happened to him, right? And he tell you what happened to him, right? Exactly. And so the problem is that now we overrepresented in the criminal justice system, but underrepresented when it comes to treatment. Exactly. And we know that between the ages of 14 and 30 years old, we got the highest suicide rate in the United States, right? So, but because of history, we're not going to a therapist, right? And so why not train your coaches to be peer therapists to be able to do it?
Well, can that be done in our schools? And let's use that to kind of transition to AB. Antonio Brown, the last month and 5 to 10 days has been traumatic. And I've been like, okay, is this mental health? Is he crazy? Or he just has too much money and he wants to do whatever he wants to do? I think now, and some would slap me for this because he's a millionaire athlete, but when you go from 30 million to 188,000, right? And of course, to us, that's a lot of money. 30 million to 188 plus the allegations of him acting crazy prior to me, I think there's some deeper issues there. And there's no question people are talking about Antonio Brown all over Barbershop as it relates to the nation, but would you say he's struggling with that? Or he just got too much money?
Most of us struggle with it. I said, me for being was a high-performing athlete and stuff like that, right? And I look back after, after I, got trained in ACEs and everything like that, right? I could identify that I probably had it when I was like 14, 15 years old. I'm talking about suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, right? And it just hit me hard 4 years ago. My mom used to call it bad nerves, but it's anxiety, I have social anxiety. I like to talk in front of people, but it may come time when I can't even really come out the house, right? I got to take 2-hour naps right?
Right.
3 baths a day just to prepare, just to get out of the house, right? Because of the environment that I grew up in.
Right, right.
And so all these athletes right there need some type of therapeutic,
Do you think they could have something? Okay.
Right.
A lot of. Go ahead.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to kind of what you're saying. What is the solution to that? What got you through those struggles?
What you so I went to see a psychiatrist. My wife made me go, right?
Right.
And I'm sitting there, you know, in denial. You know what I'm talking about? I'm thinking, here it is, I'm a pastor, social work, counselor, background in this. I know about trauma, right?
Right.
I call myself an expert in trauma. I'm out here training anybody about trauma. So I'm sitting there, bud. I'm sitting there, and the lady asked me all these questions, right? And the first thing I came to my mind was this: if I open up to you, would you understand? Right? I couldn't really tell her everything because she wouldn't be able to have the solutions to be able to help me to identify what I'm going through, right? Culturally. And so you really need someone. I talk about I really want to. And then she was telling me some techniques, right? Now what I realized is that the techniques that she was telling me to do, I already knew how to do it from playing sports. Right? I'm an anxiety attack, right? They tell you to breathe and do everything like that, right? You do the same thing at the free throw line.
Right.
You see what I'm talking about? Same exact thing. So what we do is take that same language, right? That we use as experts and put it over in the sports language, right? And do it in the kids.
Well, this is the question. At his level, dude just blew through 30 million. So you know he's at his home right now. This is depressed as ever. Can there be that therapy at that level, or should it start at the high school level?
No, I think it starts at youth level.
Yeah, even younger.
Yes.
A lot younger.
Yeah, a lot younger. It had to start at the youth level.
Right.
It really had to start at the youth level.
Makes sense.
Because it's transferred down. We know they transfer from the DNA and the genetics and everything like that. Yes.
We can even point to a case too, Everson Griffin, he entered the Vikings. And
Right.
He struggled through some mental health issues. His teammate kind of came around him, but he's clearly declared that starts a lot younger. He started that in elementary. And I think, as Andre said, it's important for us to identify that when kids are coming to us, they're coming with lots of experiences that adults that work with kids haven't always been accustomed to working with or trained to work with. And I think we're getting better when kids come to us and bring those things, and so that we create some strategies for whether they're kids all the way up to AD and professional athletes, because they have to be able to cope. Because what I see happening, if it's AB or even when Dennis told his story, it's that it just kind of exacerbated to a point where it couldn't get taken.
Well, that goes to our next subject in dealing with this at a different level, and we're going to get into our schools. And I'm going to give you my conjecture on diversity in schools. Outside of the bigger cities like Mankato, Rochester. Particularly here, Rochester's getting expensive. We know that's a big issue here. Housing, affordable housing. So a lot of our community, at least community I serve in the public defender office, they have to move in some of these smaller towns because it's easier, cheaper to live. They can't live in Rochester anymore. So in my opinion, that's one thing at least that seriously filling up our schools with a lot of diversity, a lot of impoverished folks. And my question is, as it relates to something that is debatable, when we think of all the issues that we saw in schools last year, Owatonna High School, Albert Lee High School, Andre got some stuff, Winona, Kathy's here, by the way, from Winona, Kathy's here. Obviously Rochester and their issues. Is it an issue of race or culture when it comes to the professionalism of the teacher dealing with the student, and also the interaction between student and student? Is it the issue that people are racist, or it's just that, we got this new culture in here, and I had no clue how to deal with it, so I'm going to say I don't know, I'm going to use racism to excuse it? Which do you think it is? Race or culture?
I think it's a combination. I think it's definitely a combination. The teachers don't know how to deal with kids from, some of the teachers don't know how to deal with some of the kids from the inner city. So what looks like a class disturbance to some of the teachers should be something, more of a conversation.
Right.
And, the different levels of, the different kids has been very, very disturbing if you, look at the numbers for a lot of years.
Right. I would say a combination of both too. I see it comes and you got these different kids that, speaking of our community, African American youth, they're loud, they're boisterous, they're passionate, and it's different. That's different than the Minnesota Nice or the, you know, not being respectful. Been here 15 years or whatever long I've been. So I guess I'm a Minnesotan now.
Yeah.
But I think it is culture, and then it gets into that racial piece. So,
You know, I would agree, and I think what Bud said is it is a combination of both. What I see is, particularly in Owatonna, when we have, you know, especially students that are coming from East Africa or families from East Africa, and the biggest difference that I see is just a fear of the unknown around the difference between Islam and Christianity.
right.
And I think that's the cultural piece that I see playing
Yeah.
into it. We don't understand, I don't understand East African culture. I don't understand African American culture because I didn't grow up in it.
Right.
And we all bring our backgrounds, and I think the biggest thing I see is the staff learning that they carry with them some bias. I mean, it's unconscious bias, maybe it's overt bias, but they carry it with them all the time. And it's not something that, because as a white male, I can't walk away from it and feel this guilt, blame, and shame, because then I walk away from the conversation. Because look, I'm white. I don't ever have to think about race.
Yeah.
But my friends of color have to think about race all the time.
Right.
And so for me, it's important that white teachers, white administrators like myself, have a clear understanding of our bias going in, and that we work through our journey to control for that and try to understand different perspectives.
Yes.
You brought something up, Bud, that when I was a principal here at Willow Creek, it was my journey of learning that just because we had a group of black students that were being a little loud and boisterous, didn't mean they were doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
But I grew up in a world where you keep quiet, you keep your head down, and you keep moving forward.
Yeah.
But it was my journey through that and my experiences here that I think helped equip me to understand that you have to approach every situation and understand what their background is and their experiences are before you start to judge. Because once you start judging, it's over.
Right, I agree. Well, you heard the man. On our first show this year, we have Superintendent Jeff Elstad from Owatonna Public Schools, and we're grateful that you're here.
I'm happy to be here today.
And we wanted to bring you on because Owatonna High School highlighted this issue with something that not only went statewide, but it went national.
Absolutely.
The issue. And just to say, we got two Owatonna students here.
All right.
Mariah
Well,
and Danica. And then we got representative. We got Kathy here again from Winona.
Go Spartan.
I can't let Jeff get away with that. Not in my house, no, Jeff, no. After y'all beat us yesterday, too.
No.
But I do, Andre, I was spot my heart
I know,
being former Willow Creek, and all the kids went to Mayo.
Yes. He's a good one. He
Yeah.
can do that here.
So we know the incident last year. And before we get into it, it must be said that it exploded in Owatonna High School. It's
Without
in every,
question.
and in every school, it just exploded there. And we'll in our video edit, we'll show a little bit of it. But obviously last year was a mini riot. I'm going to call it that, right? A student, and correct me if I'm wrong, students. Mariah, she was actually in that. A student sent out a derogatory text.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep.
And then in our social media age, it went haywire. And then what's that, Mariah?
It started with 3 girls listening to music, and then she
Yeah,
took a
over the
picture.
weekend.
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, my friend said the N-word for the first time. I'm so proud of her." And then a guy from the wrestling team sent out a text and put it on Snapchat. And then another kid said it in the Snapchat story, and then it got sent everywhere. Then texting.
Oh, and then it went haywire. Then the African American students got mad about that, and then you had this huge incident that and I'm not dissing or the police officers, but they were overwhelmed. From what I understand, they put all the African American kids, the diverse kids, in the gym, and then the Euro American kids up in the classroom somewhere, and that just caused a lot of friction, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. I did happen to go to the some of the meetings afterwards and talk to some folks there. Obviously, an ugly situation. With media, it looked uglier than what it was, but it was a huge representative of what we are dealing with. Andre got some a messenger from another school about an incident, and we hear about it all the time. Jeff, as you have dealt with that issue, and we deal with stuff positively here, how have you now, almost a year later, I'm not sure if it's a full year later, how are you dealing with that going into 2019, 2020?
Well, I would tell you first and foremost, Donovan, that was the saddest day of my entire educational career. I've been an educator for almost 27 years. And it was a sad day because what I saw was a response that was overwhelming for everyone.
Right.
The response, I believe, could have been different. I think we've learned something from
Right,
that.
right.
One of the things that we forget about is that teenage kids rely on relationships because that builds trust.
Right.
And when that trust isn't there, and one of the things that we put into place is the police have to do their job. And when they come in, they're set to do a certain job.
Right.
But as an education system, our first intervention is always using the relationships that we've garnered with students to help them understand, help them through something. I'm not excusing any of the behavior that was there.
Right.
But what I am saying is that it's important that we rely on a school district to have good relationships with students to where we can take a situation and try to de-escalate it to a point where we get to logical conversation.
Yeah.
What I saw that made me so sad that day was I didn't see kids being unruly. I saw kids that were scared.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, and that's what probably got me emotional is that our kids were scared. And I was in the gym. I mean, I saw kids scared. I saw kids running around trying to kind of say, it's going to be okay. Let's just, settle things down. But it erupted. And, the one thing that we learn is, unfortunately, we learn from mistakes. Right. We made some mistakes as a school district along the way. We've worked with the Owatonna Police Department and other law enforcement officials. We've all debriefed as part of this to know how do we work with this differently. Right. So moving into this school year, last year we had some major repair work to do with our students because they're a lifeblood.
Right.
And so we worked a little bit with Bukata Hayes coming from Mankato. They came over and worked with our students both in large groups and small groups. We also engaged in a different process about how we work through discipline. We hadn't done a lot with restorative justice or restorative practice, and so we've actually implemented that full steam this year because that healing and learning comes through conversation. Right. It doesn't come through punitive action. It comes through conversation about how do we fix things, how do we equip students to better handle something when it happens. Right. And the other thing is, we're working to try to being more inclusive of students. And I would say we're much like many other rural communities in that we bring the experiences of the white background that's there. Right. And it's learning how to respect and understand. And the other thing we're doing, and this is so I brought our administrative team through the Glenn Singleton Courageous Conversations about race. And you know what? It's such a great platform because it talks about the journey, because you don't want to talk about it doesn't mean that you have an obligation to talk about race with our students. This is probably the most telling thing. Right. So last spring when things was probably about April, I had a student come forward to me and say, a white student, and say, hey, Mr. Elstad, when are the adults going to be ready to talk about race? Because we're ready to talk about it. Oh, wow. That's empowering. When I hear that student voice coming in. And so we've started to do some things. We have a DIG group, our diversity and inclusion group. We're trying to commingle that with our student government. Okay. Because one of the things that we recognize is that our students of color at Owatonna High School and within our system haven't been offered or had the opportunity for leadership positions. Right. We need to change that walk.
Right. No doubt. So. Well, that's good. How are the students doing? I have a daughter that was in the riot there, the mini riot, I'll call it, and she had some feelings around that. How are the ones that feel that they were disenfranchised through the whole thing? Obviously, more of our minority students. How are they feeling? Because what I got from what I heard is, oh, they're not going to do anything about it. It's just another issue. This is always here. Nothing's going to happen. How are they being fed and helped?
Well, the first thing is this. If we think that we can bring in one facilitator and we've got the issues around racism,
That's right, that's right.
So what it is this. We recognize that we still have work to do to gain the trust of our students.
Right.
I know that some of our students today are still skeptical about what's going on, and that's okay.
Right.
Because in order for us to win that trust or to retrieve and bring that trust back into the circle,
Right.
We have to keep doing things. We have to keep talking about it. We have to realize that our work around race is never done.
Right.
We don't check, we don't check an anti-racist behavior as a checkbox and say, well, we've done that and we've learned that. Because I've said before, we will never, ever be done.
Mm-hmm.
It's a consistent journey for us to learn more. I'm in a different spot than I was a year ago, but yet I have a long way to go to in my
Right.
own understandings, and
Right.
so I own that.
That's good.
And so one thing that what I realized is that that sometimes the system have to change,
Yes.
right? And so and we never challenge the system,
Mhm.
right? What happened is that when our kids walk in there, we be re-traumatized,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're never thinking, talking about why. They always ask the question, why your kids act this way when you're with me outside of the school district, right? The school system, right? It becomes a safe place for them, right? And when they get into the system, things trigger. I used the example of that on the third floor of the government center, right? I'm a probation officer. I got to go through all these things and stuff like that, right? It triggered me, right? It triggered right there. It felt
Right.
like the thing felt like I'm a criminal already.
Right.
It brought back my trauma, right? Because dealing with the police officer and dealing with that stuff. So sometimes I think that we have to ask the minority kids and students, do this feel like a jail?
Right.
Right?
That's right.
Maybe not to you don't feel like, but do it feel like that, right? We're doing epigenetics, we're dealing with that, right? It passed down because most of their family been in the criminal justice system, right? And first of all, if it's set up just like that, my trauma gonna hit, so I'm going to act out. So are you doing something to change the system as well?
Well, part of the system is changing the adults that form the system.
Yeah.
A couple of things that I've been working on right now is, and it goes out, for me, it goes all the way to our school board. Because the school board sets policy.
Yes.
And within that systemic racism, there are pieces of policy that need to be changed.
Yes.
And so we're bringing our school board right now through the courageous conversation about race. And I think it's the first, maybe, I can't speak for some of like Minneapolis and St. Paul and others, but we're maybe one of the first rural districts at taking our school board through that courageous conversation protocol to understand the 6 conditions and the 4 agreements that are there. Because it makes a difference. And this is the filter I use every time, and I encourage other administrators and board members alike, and even our teachers, think, what does race have to do with this? And if it's a policy or system that's in place, I'm asking myself that question, so what does race have to do with this? And I think about that, and that lens helps, I think, take down some of those systemic barriers. The other thing that we're doing, and I recognize that racism is not isolated to school district. This is a community-wide effort, and we have to change adult behavior. And so within that, we pulled together 40 community leaders from Owatonna, and they're spending a full year with a couple of instructors from MSU Mankato, Dr. Natalie Rasmussen and Dr. Ginger Gustafson, and we're walking through the courageous conversation with our community leaders.
We didn't know about that.
So we have members of the police department, our city administrator, we have members of the faith community. We have, our first meeting was last Friday, and we laid down the 6 conditions. We talked about the 4 agreements, and when I walked away, I was expecting, okay, which one of my white colleagues is going to walk up and go, this is really heavy, and I feel really guilty about this, because then we walk away from the conversation.
Absolutely.
But I would tell you this, I'm proud to say that everyone came up and said, this is the conversation we have to have.
That is great.
I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
Because that means that helps us not only take down the systems within school districts, but take down other governmental systems that have set up those racial barriers.
So I don't want to dominate the conversation, but one thing I find out, we get professionals within our community, and we don't engage the non-professionals. And I find that's I think that we have to change that.
Right.
Because it's their kids are being affected the most. It's not the professionals, because the professionals know how to teach their kids how to navigate, right? And they far removed from some of the behaviors that those kids and those parents demonstrators, right? And I think that sometimes we frightened because we can't control how the outbursts and stuff. And that's the conversation we're gonna have, right?
Absolutely.
Because you have more non-professionals now in your community than professionals, right? And that's the one somewhere we got to figure out how do we engage the non-professional community, right? And give them skill sets so they can be able to teach their kids how to navigate your system, right? Because if not, you'll suspend your disciplinary thing will go off the chart, right? And then those men in the criminal justice system gonna go off the chart, right? About dealing with your non-professionals. You have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere, right? And I commend you for what you're doing, right? But what I'm finding across the board as I travel, no one dealing with the ones who've been affected the most. They're the experts, right? I told them it's great that you bring me and do a training, but I tell you the best trainer is grandma.
Right, exactly.
Oh, because grandma now is she raised her kids, she raised her children kids, right? She can teach every white teacher in the district how to deal with a black boy, how to deal with a black girl, right? But we want someone with a PhD in this. You want somebody with a PhD in foodology.
Right. And that's where that cultural piece
About
needs to come back in.
who understand the mindset of the kid, right? And you can teach that teacher, why how back is that right there? Boy, don't you do it. Don't you do it. You do something about. So we have to really change our way of who's the expert, or who isn't the expert, right? So you bring them in, I guarantee you, because they already got the connections of the community and stuff like that, they can change the whole atmosphere of the community in the school.
We're finding something similar with that. I'm gonna go specific to our small American population in Owatonna, that probably over the last 9 months, I've been to mosque 3 times to talk with some of the elders. And what I'm learning from that is their questions are not so much, their questions are about the very thing of saying, how do we partner better with the school district? Because this sort of K-12 system we have in the United States of America is different from what we grew up in. And so how do we engage now? And I think one of the biggest linkages we have with, and I don't want to call them non-professionals, but I want to call them parents. Community members. How do we engage our parents? For me, as an educator, I look at parents and how do we continue to partner with them, but how do we walk them through the journey as well? So that they're asking themselves a question of what does race have to do with this? What does, how do I work with my kids? And then I think about generational things and talk about grandma. I mean, I learned a lot of lessons from my grandmother. And when I think about that connection and the respect I had from my grandmother, probably more so, and my parents have passed away, sorry mom and dad, that I listened to her maybe more than I listened to them. But I would agree, it starts with parents. And I think, we do parent education, we have early childhood family ed. It starts there. And I think talking about that in those ECFE classes to help engage parents in the conversation too.
That's good.
Yeah, I agree. You kind of took the points I was trying to make, and all the points you was making, that's kind of what I wanted to go with. Because a lot of times, as a kid, a minority kid in the school system, you kind of feel, you get that institutional feel, and you get trained already to get ready for that prison system. Mentally. You understand? So it becomes a traumatic experience for a kid. So, and the other point I was trying to make was the same thing he was saying about how do we engage those parents. The parents are the real people, the grandparents, the elders, the people that started, because a lot of kids, like my son, he went to school, he was a totally different person than he was when he was at home. He had no problems at home, none, because he knew what he could get away with, what he couldn't get away with. Kids test boundaries. And I know it's a struggle. I was just in a PTA meeting with a middle school out here. I think it was John Adams, and it was they talked about the problem, the tension between the African-born kids and then the American-born black kids, and there's some tension there. And they were struggling dealing with how to deal with that. You get tension out there, the same type of tension in Owatonna School District?
I would imagine there is. I don't hear anything overtly that comes back to me. I've heard different things. This is even specifically when I was working here at Willow Creek. There was some tension we had, particularly with members of our Latino community and some of our African American and even African national, East African population. There was some tension there. I think the biggest thing was it came down to that fear of not understanding. And I keep going back to that. So for a couple thousand years, people live in fear, that because we don't look like somebody, because we don't understand their background, we become somehow afraid. And then that fear sort of builds up this, defensiveness to a point where, and so I could go on and on about that.
How do you bring those people along? Because in all these smaller rural communities, we know folks that have been there, they've lived there all their lives, old money's there, they played football for the team in 1960, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
How are you, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, bringing those folks along? Because they're sitting there thinking, wow, this is crazy. I drive through Owatonna and it looks different and blah, blah, blah. And I've been in the community for a while, so I've seen the transition in Owatonna. How are you helping them along? You got, you're a leader, right? So you got to galvanize both sides. How are you helping those folks? Because they are not escaping this issue of diversity in Owatonna and your school system. It's there to stay.
That's a good question. I don't know that I have all of the right answers. As a leader in the community, it's my job to advocate for our students, and that means all of our students. And in that advocacy is going out to the community and saying, it's not okay for you to think that.
Right.
And I often call myself a neutral interrupter, because when I'm at a coffee shop and when somebody says something to me, I don't have to be overtly offensive, but I can say, you can't say those things.
Right.
That's not okay. Because one of the things, and this goes back to the fear factor, which is we are so much more alike than different. Right. And I know that sounds kind of trite, and it sounds like,
it's the truth, yeah.
But the thing is that I know that when black families come to me, they love their kids just as much as I love my kids.
Yeah. Right.
And when they come to school, and one of the things I learned very clearly is that when a family comes into me, the first thing I say is, you know your kids best, and you love your kids. And that's one thing we have in common, so let's start from there and build. What I would do is, with the people you're talking about, is when people come to me, rather than push them away and say, you're racist, stop saying that, I bring them into the conversation and say, tell me more about that.
Very good.
So we can start to build some bridges, because, I often ask our white staff, our white administrators, I say, how many people of color, how many friends of color do you associate with? And I've done the Glenn Singleton number line, and you line up, and it looks that way everywhere I've ever been.
Right.
The only spot that looked any different was when I was up in Minneapolis working with a group up there, and it looked different. But again, for me, it's about engaging people and bringing them into that conversation, because if I push them away, it's just going to exacerbate their feelings about it. And so it's pulling them in and trying to create an understanding and say, did you know that? Do you understand? So that's where I'm at. I'm a warrior. I believe in every one of our kids, and I feel that's my job as a leader.
Very impressive what you guys are doing there.
So my question going back to the riot, the mini riot. If you went through that situation again, you was in the gym, what would you have did different?
Well, there's a whole protocol that's different now, but what I would tell you, and again, you wish you could rewind time, because there are about 15 steps we should have taken even before this. So, as was mentioned, there was a student that happened over the weekend. We actually were working with that group of young ladies that kind of had this first kind of weekend piece. Right. And we're trying to work through that with them. But then it seems like it was one thing after another. What we would have done differently is identified when we saw students were becoming somewhat agitated, it means that our high school staff, those that have relationships, interject themselves and say, look, I know you're upset right now. Let's talk through this. Let's build a bridge. And of course, that's always being proactive.
Right.
But I would tell you, when kids become afraid, they generally become angry. And that's where we entered into a situation. So it's taking so many steps in between to kind of de-escalate that fear and anger, because I want all of our kids, regardless of what we look like, to look at any one of our staff and say, I know you got me. I know you got me.
Right.
Or the staff saying, I've got you till you got you. And that's the biggest part, because it comes down to the relationship. And so we put a team in place now called our Blue Team, which is if we have a situation that kind of we feel is kind of bubbling up, our Blue Team are what I call our relationship experts in the building that can really interject with kids, be present. Because that presence helps people, if they trust them, they feel safe.
Right.
And you know, when kids don't feel safe.
Yeah. So how diverse is like your staff or and stuff like that? Do the kids have anyone inside your school system that look like them?
That's a major thing we have to work on, Trey. We are trying to bring in more staff. In fact, what I would tell you is that we've taken some steps, and I realize they're baby steps, but in this last hiring cycle, we were able to bring in more staff of color than we've ever had before.
Awesome.
Which for me, I want our students to see themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we're learning this. So I'm going to go back to my days when I was working in Rochester. So I got to go to historically black colleges in the southern tier of the United States to help recruit teachers to bring them to Rochester. I'll never forget a conversation I had with a young man. He was an English language arts teacher. And he said, okay, so we're in Mississippi. And he says to me, you know, I really love what you have to offer. It sounds like your school system is great, but I'm going to tell you two things. First of all, it's cold in Minnesota. I'm not going to be moving up to Minnesota because that's not where I want to live. And the second thing is, all of my family lives in Mississippi. I'm connected to my family. I don't want to leave my family here and move north. So that doesn't mean that we say, well, I guess we did our job, and they said no. Our work then becomes, how do we take our own kids and instill that belief that they can become educators or work in our school system?
Absolutely.
And so we've started a teacher academy at Owatonna High School.
Oh, go.
And we're specifically...
This is the dude.
I like that.
Right here, Rochester.
I like that.
We're specifically reaching out to students of color and really incentivizing and encouraging them to be part of the teacher academy. We have an agreement right now with MSU Mankato, which is one of the best teacher prep colleges in the area. And so we can bring them from the high school right into their experience. But here's the thing. We keep them on our ropes. We can keep pulling them back to Owatonna because we want our students of color to see themselves.
Right.
And there's only, in my opinion, there's only one way to do it, which is we have to raise our own.
Yeah. So with that, do the college that you connected to have professors that look like them?
Yes.
I mean, because that's going to be very important. So what I find out is that for me being 25 years, you know, being here longer than Baltimore, one thing what you're gonna find out, you train them, then they leave, right? Because other things is not put in place. You see what I'm talking about? We tend to
Owatonna needs a jazz club.
right? Yeah,
I would agree.
But no, I definitely like, you know, the say what you're doing, right? While we're doing that, right? But they have a thing they call now across the nation, call me Mister. Are you familiar with that?
I am
program?
familiar with that,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, you do your
Yeah.
homework. I like that. I like that. Call me Mister, right? So I like what exactly you're doing. And so we just gotta. I don't want to see not just in general, see our kids train and not leave, because those kids know how to navigate the system, right? Not just the cold weather. It's a system they have to know how to navigate.
Right.
Minnesota nice is not nice about it.
That's true.
You know.
It's the passive aggressive Minnesota.
Right,
Exactly.
right. And your average person from somewhere else can't survive, right? You know, people come here, they say, "What? We want a 3-year term. We'll get our training from Mayo, county, whatever we want to get.
5-year plan.
We're out.
We out, right? And then how do we if we give our kids good experiences, they'll go somewhere and come back, or they'll stay at our local colleges, right? But the problem is that they don't have good experience. My daughter's the same way, right? She doesn't navigate the system, but the first thing she said, "Dad, I'm getting out of here." It's because some of the cultural stuff that the kids are missing.
Right.
And so, do you have any culture-specific programming that you aim at to bring it in the school? And how would the staff feel about a culture-specific program? Because I hear when they would say that, why you gonna have something specific for this group of kids and not that group of kids?
So one of the things you recognize is that we have to talk about race because we've kind of chased it away, or we've called it something, we call it something politically correct all the time.
Right.
We went through a training this summer, actually our high school staff did, it's called CLEAR Strategies. It's culturally and linguistic appropriate education. And what it doesn't just train about is that, something that's linguistically appropriate, but we do bring race out and talk about it because it's important that our students have an opportunity to express their viewpoints in a safe setting.
Yeah.
So that's something we've kind of interjected within it. The other thing is that when kids bring us those topics, as a white male, I can't walk away or say, well, I just don't feel comfortable talking about it. I have to be comfortable talking about it. And until, in my opinion, until educators walk through the protocol where they understand that they're on their own journey, they can't move forward in a way where they can engage in conversation, because again, many times that you walk away because of guilt, blame, or shame. And then it's just like, well, it's taboo, we don't want to talk about that. But the thing is race is present every day. And we have to get to that. I want to go back to your conversation or the question, Andre, about are the colleges, bring in professors that look like our students of color. MSU Mankato, I think, has done an awesome job of really putting together a department. I work with Dr. Timothy Berry from Mankato. He's a black man, came from the Minneapolis School District to work with the St. Paul School District to work in Mankato. And we have a partnership together. So there are 7 school districts that partner with MSU Mankato. And one of our biggest pushes is, how do we interject racial equity within all of our work? And because it benefits all of our students, and it's sad for me as an educator of 27 years that it took me probably 20 of those years to finally be able to understand and start to have the conversation with myself about it. Because I was one of those white people that walked away from the conversation. And I would tell you, having Glenn Singleton sit in front of you and say, you have got to be part of this conversation, that encouraged me. And it informed me in a way where I didn't feel guilt anymore, but I felt like I had something more to do. And I still feel that way today. I'm empowered by it.
Right. Well, thank you for putting up with us on our first show. A lot of glitches, but we're getting there. But we've got a couple more questions, and we'll get you out of here.
Yeah.
We're so thankful that you came, and the creative ideas you're doing, I have not heard of yet. And perhaps I'm ignorant of those other school districts.
Well, we have to better communicate those two, right?
We do, because it seems like you are the most cutting-edge superintendent in South Minnesota.
It is.
That's what it sounds like to me.
And we, and I think that, I don't know, maybe Jeff, you can help us out with this. I ain't gonna put you on the hot seat there. That if we could have, a round table with the superintendents. Because, y'all leaders, in Colonel White was saying, and be a champion, right? I'm thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Really, right?
Absolutely.
We all passionate about the same thing.
Yes, we
That's
are.
why we're
That's
here
exactly
and
right.
we're talking about
Right,
it, right?
That's
And,
right.
and saying, okay, this is something we doing that I don't know if y'all get together and talk about some of the stuff that that y'all do and stuff, but we want to. So we have an audience that we want them to be able to hear the stuff that you're doing, right? Because sometimes they don't hear it, right? It's a miscommunication. How do we get the information to the people who need it the most? And so I don't know what it will look like.
One thing, Jeff, is partner with BarbershopTalk, so let's go back.
Yeah.
We'll get it out.
Right. Well, and I tell you, we do, superintendents and other administrators are talking about this topic. Some are more engaged than others because maybe their experience doesn't, maybe they're working in a district that most of the students are white and they just don't, it isn't present for them. I would say, particularly in the Big 9 conference, we talk about these concerns and things we have constantly. And we've all been through different protocols. We all try to understand, but what we take and then apply it to our practice, and that we don't kind of check the box, and that we continue to move forward. Now, I'm proud to work with a group of educators, particularly in Owatonna, that are willing to lean into the conversation. And I think as superintendents and as other leaders in school districts, we have to encourage more people to lean in.
Right.
Because until we all do that, we're going to have some of the same issues happen. And what happened at Owatonna High School, I hope never happens again. I hope it never happens again. But it allows us, and unfortunately through that, we've now learned that we have to address it. We have to do things we can't talk about anymore. We have to act.
Right. I want to hit one more issue, and then a couple of personal questions for you as we look to inspire our community. This morning, riots go crazy at some football games around high schools around our nation, guns, and so on and so forth. How are you dealing with security in our schools, given all of the crazy national stuff that's going on? Is it getting to the place where you as a superintendent have to say, law enforcement, this is your thing? Or is it, we're just a soft target, we're going to do this and just trust that we'll be ready when it happens? Or if it happens.
And I would tell you, this topic around school security is what keeps me up at night. You know, we put systems in place, right? So we can put a system in our buildings where there's a safe check-in, where you have to go through an office, you have to declare your purpose in the building. We have a system called Raptor where photo ID has to be presented, it's scanned, and it checks to see if it's, you know, if you're a person coming into a building that has had, you know, some sort of criminal piece around sexual contact with children, you're not allowed in the building, you know, those sorts of things. And so when you do that, it's one level of security we have. So in most of our buildings, it's like that. At Owatonna High School, that building itself is 36 doors in the building. It was built in 1921. And one of the things that keeps me up at night is the fact that we don't, although we try to do our best with secure entrances, it's an area that we need to improve on. To your question around the security, so we walk this razor thin edge of, we want every student to feel safe and secure when we're there, so do we lock it down like we lock down prisons?
Right.
Or do we keep our places, this people where people want to go, because we encourage community to come into our building, because you can't just drop your kids off at school and say, well, I've done that, I've done my job. One more thing. We want people from our community coming in. So it's this razor thin edge of, are we a safe environment? Are we warm? Are we welcome? And are we bringing people in? Or do we have such a security system in place now that we're locking doors behind people?
Right.
And so it's a debate that goes back and forth.
Right.
I would love to get to a spot where we have just enough security that allows us to maybe scrutinize who's in the building, and that they can't come and have access, particularly to high school, to 1,500 kids immediately.
Right. Because Owatonna High School, is it one of the biggest schools
in our area? It's one of the biggest schools. So we have about 1,500 students, and we're really only behind a couple of schools here in Rochester.
Right.
But it's an issue that keeps me up at night. And I would tell you, I don't agree with educators carrying firearms. I know that has been debated as well.
That's a debate.
And some of it comes down to science for me, right? Because if you have educators who don't do regular training, I mean, police officers, law enforcement, they do regular training with firearms for accuracy and things like that. But exactly. And the thing is that they have their accuracy level for a moving target, like somebody that they're looking to get after with a gun, is higher. But now take a layperson who never does that. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. I'll never agree with that, because I just don't think it's the right approach. So anyway, I know that's a debatable topic.
It's a tough issue, but it's just, I don't know if it's growing or it's a tough issue. And I know you as a superintendent have to. It's one of those things that keep you up at night.
It is, because I don't want to be that one community that says, boy, I wish we would have done something else.
Right.
You know? Right. That's what scares me.
Well, your career, you've been everywhere. Tell us about your career, why you got into education, and how you would inspire our audience and other audience to get into education.
Well, I feel, when you say that, Donovan, I feel like I've been around like the Johnny Cash song. I've been everywhere. Exactly. So when I think about my career, though, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. But you know, I grew up in southern Minnesota. I was born and raised in Fairville, Minnesota.
Oh, okay, okay.
I went.
You know Judge Jeff Johnson?
Yes, I do.
Tell me some stories about him.
Okay.
Jeff, love you.
Anyway, you know, grew up there. Left. When I was going to college, I went to St. Cloud State on a football scholarship, and I really had no other plan. I mean, I went to play football, and I was an offensive guard. Okay. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to go on and play professional football, because I had that boyhood dream, and I wanted to realize that. Well, a knee injury took that away from me, and so, and again, I would have never made it anyway, but that was my dream. But I started out in international business. In fact, I took Russian language. I have Russian studies. I had international business on my mind. And about halfway through, probably a quarter way through my junior year, I had to take a humanities class. And the only class that was open, I went through general registration, was Introduction to Special Education. And when I took that class, there was a 2-week internship. The first week was I had to serve in a home with developmentally disabled adults. And the second week was working in an early childhood special education center in St. Cloud. And I'll never forget it. I had spent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in that early childhood special ed class, and I called my dad and I said, Dad, I'm changing my major because
Sounds
this
good.
is my calling. That was my passion.
Yeah.
And so I'm so passionate about education.
Yeah.
I started out for the first 10 years of my career playing with babies on the floor because I was working, I was a speech and language pathologist.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I was
wow.
working with
Okay.
them.
That's cool.
I did home visits, and I really found my passion around it. And I'm just as passionate about students and working with that today. I mean, I've been an early childhood special ed teacher, speech and language pathologist. I've been a director of special education in a couple of different districts.
Wow.
I worked over here in Rochester, which was a great experience. I became the principal of Willow Creek Middle School. I was an assistant principal at Owatonna High School before that time for 3 years. Then I wanted to be a superintendent. One of the great opportunities I had, I was just here west of Rochester, out in Byron for 5 years as a superintendent. And I loved that experience in the community of Byron, but there was something calling me back to Owatonna. And part of that calling was this, and this is where part of my passion is. I want to work with a diverse community, and not just racially diverse. I want economic diversity, I want religious diversity, I want cultural diversity. I want all of those things wrapped into one because for me, it's the fabric of our society. And what can I do as an administrator, and more so as a white man,
Right.
to try to bring our society to a different spot. And so I go to work every day. I wake up every morning thinking, how do I empower, how do I inspire people to be the best?
How do we, and I think, and we'll wrap up, how do we see the larger community? How do we get the larger community, to see the benefit in investing in diversity? I mean, because, they need to see the bigger picture, why we need each other. You see what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
we know, so you got sports background.
Right.
We know.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's exactly
You
right.
got it, right? So how do you get those outside of the team concept? You're talking about, right? Sports gets it. You know what I'm talking about? So how you get now a community to have diversity, right? To say, all right, we need to now have a team concept. So we can win when it comes to diversity.
That's right.
And the disparities, excuse me. Right?
Yes. I'm with you 100%. And if I had the answer, I wish I'd be using it. What I think is it's not just one answer.
Yeah.
I think there are many answers. I think part of it is trying to understand. It goes back to that whole notion of understanding before you seek to be understood. You know? And it's understanding the background of somebody, what they bring to it. It doesn't mean that they bring something negative to the conversation. It doesn't mean that when I look at somebody that has a different color skin and I, that we don't have the same exact, it's taking away fear, you know? And I think about it, if we live in a world where we can take fear away from conversations, you know, why are people fearful when they walk by someone that's different than them, that somehow they're going to offend them, or somehow they're going to do something that is not seen as right in their eyes. And so, Andre, if I had the answers to that question, but I do think all I know is that I can do my part. And my part is trying to take the babies in our community, in our society, in our school system, and giving them, empowering our students to have a voice so that they feel like they're the generation that, I think generationally, I think we're getting better. We've got a long way to go. And all I can do is help prepare people for that.
One more question, and it's a tough one. You have to become a businessman. Okay.
You don't have to. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I have a question. Since the incident, has your staff received any cultural competency training?
Yes. So we did some training right away, which was more or less just trying to understand the situation better. We did a series of events, and we've done 2 of 3 now. Bukata Hayes has been probably our facilitator for the conversations. But we did something that included all of our community called We're Better Together. And we've done 2, we've got a 3rd session coming up here, I think the end of October in Owatonna. So that was part of a community training, but we have pulled our staff, and in fact, when I came in, we established, and this is now, I'm on my 3rd year, I established a 7-year plan to how we build capacity with our staff. So this year, we have about 115 school district personnel that are participating and walking through the Courageous Conversation protocol. But what we do then, we don't have enough staff development money to bring everybody into that conversation because it's not a one and done. It is once a month that we're meeting for a half day with staff to really talk about it and having those discussions. So we're on year 3 right now. We've got 4 to go, but by the end of that 7-year phase, and every one of our staff will have gone through the courageous conversation protocol, and engaging in deeper conversations. We've built equity teams in every one of our buildings that have key individuals that are advocates for making sure that all of our students are served and that we're taking down school system barriers even within our buildings. But when it comes down to training, I sometimes pause at training because I don't want ever to think that it's a box you can check. Well, we've done that diversity training, so now we can move on.
Right.
This is an ongoing effort, and we're never done. We're never done.
That's good. Gil, you got the.
All right, just on the outside of everything, I'm a felon, and what I wanted to ask you is like the generations have changed where more fathers are wanting to be involved in their kids' lives and education and everything in the world, but like we are seen from a different perspective now because we are felons. I was just wondering, like, in the educational system, you know, it should be, I mean, well, I'm saying for myself, it should be some change because we're needed there now and we want to be there for our kids' lives. And I was just saying, like, can it be some changes, because it'll make a lot of more people come to, you know, the educational part if they know that they're able to help as felons. And I don't know what, like, I mean, I know it could be different situations where people who do have certain felons are not allowed, but I think that's really important, and I was just trying to see what would you think, how that came up in your conversations about felons being able to help in education.
Good thought.
So I see this as a situation and an opportunity for us to make change. Part of me looks at it and thinks, okay, when I was a teenager, I made plenty of mistakes. Part of it was I maybe didn't get caught. Part of it was the way I looked. Okay, and I get that, and I fully understand that. But I think, Gil, what you're asking is, can we always be judging the mistakes of something that happened, you know, previously in your life? And the answer from me personally is no. Everyone deserves chances and multiple chances, because who am I? I'm not judge or jury. I don't make those decisions.
Right.
But what I want to do is embrace. So if I have parents that have criminal backgrounds that want to come into a building, because you know what, people grow, people change, and so I would be a strong advocate for making sure that, particularly if there was a mistake made earlier in life, I want everyone to be able to come into our buildings. And why do we get to be the judge and jury for a lifetime sentence of things that you know, happened a long time ago? You know, and again, hope I answered your question, Gil. I'm an advocate for.
Jeff, I gotta tell you, man, you got all the good answers.
Yes, he does.
Right.
Superintendents is watching y'all. Better
Of
take
the
notes.
year, right here.
Take notes.
First and foremost, when I was a principal at Willow Creek, one of my best friends, I'm not going to mention the name, but I hired a felon to come in and work, and I advocated hard with our HR department here, and our HR department in Rochester was willing to work with it. And now he's a community member, and I think I spoke his name before when I was here.
Good guy too.
He's a very good guy and one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And he's been such a strong advocate for our students, even in the Rochester school system. And so it's our opportunity, because of mistakes made early in life. We shouldn't ever be judge or jury for an entire lifetime.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, one more question. What is your biggest sell for Owatonna Public Schools? A lot of folks have lost faith in public education, charter schools, online schools, homeschooling, and I know, and I've learned this can hurt the economics of a public school system. Why go to Owatonna Public Schools?
Well, I think we offer a number of different things, and I could talk about all of our academic programming, but I think what I'm seeing, and I'm proud to say that we have a staff that's committed and learning more about how we best serve all of our students. And I'm not taking away from other school districts, because I'm not here to compete with anybody.
Right.
But I am here to tell you is that we are setting, and I believe as a leader, I'm trying to set the tone that we have a lot to do. And if we're going to serve all, we better take specific steps to know how we're serving all of our students. And I'm not saying just students of color. I'm talking about students that come from poverty, students with disabilities, all sorts of things. Because if we're not prepared to do that, we're not a very good school system. You know? And we have significant gaps. We have racial achievement gaps that exist. And if all we do is we wipe our hands and say, well, that's the way it's going to be, we're not serving our community very well. I think we're coming from a spot where we know and understand where our blind spots are. And so we're trying to work through those. And I'm not afraid to look at someone and say, we're not perfect, and we probably never will be.
Right.
But we're going to work every day, and it's in our motto: inspire excellence, every learner, every day.
Oh, that's great.
And
Wow.
for me, it's about inspiring people. And so, I think about some of the programs in our elementary buildings right now. So we went away from a gifted and talented program to a program called Rising Scholars, because the one thing we pulled out right away is there were no kids of color.
Right.
In any one of our gifted programs and our advanced placement courses, it's because we weren't specifically empowering students to say, we need you to be part of this. Because you know what?
That's real.
All of our kids come with a level of intelligence, and it's not just in science or math, it's everything. So if you excel in physical education, or you excel in the culinary arts, those are advanced placement kind of kids. And we want to empower them to give them, because they're excellent at what they do.
Right.
So,
all right, well, thank you. Well, there you have it. Inspire excellence every day.
Every day.
That is amazing. Now you know why we had him on the show. Kathy, you have something else?
Yes, I do. You were speaking about having teachers of color on your staff. I would just challenge you that in that search for children, because I went to Houston High School.
Okay.
And I graduated in Houston, Minnesota, not Houston, Texas. Houston, Minnesota.
Caledonia.
Nobody looked like me. No students, no teachers, nobody in the town. We were actually the only family of color there. So for me, it's not just getting a teacher or teachers of color, it's getting teachers of color with backgrounds that have been through things, and not criminal backgrounds.
Right.
Because the incident in Owatonna, I think, was also fueled by nobody looks like them, nobody can relate to what they're going through.
Right.
It's not just the time that they spend in school with each other, it's the ignorance that's bred at home.
Right.
So, I think that played a part in that. So,
Absolutely.
I would like to see, counselors or some people in the school that can relate to what is going on for everybody that's there.
Right.
Because there is tension amongst blacks and East Africans, and so it's not just a culture of black and white. And I think that your staff needs to understand that it's a culture amongst cultures that is going on as well.
That's exactly right. No, that's huge. Yeah.
Well, we want to thank Superintendent Jeff Elstad for coming out. Now you know why we had this guy. This is a magnificent superintendent in an area where you're doing a lot of change. And I'm not just in Owatonna, but you're taking on a lot of good stuff. So we're thankful for having you. Inspire excellence, every student, every day. Thanks for tuning in, Barbershop Talk family. We'll see you next time.
All right.